today's Ches Tevis Toshin Ayin Base. So we saw that the Alter Rebbe began with the statement that every nefesh, every what he called the nefesh hashenis, every nefesh halakis by the Jewish people, by Yidden, was a divine portion from above, a chelik elka mimal, a portion of the divine. And it's worth indicating that the word elka is a absolute expression, meaning divinity, stam. In the actual concept of divinity in its true and essential definition, what we call etzem b'chsidet. So a chelik elka mimal means, as it were, to use the expression, a chip off the old block. A chelik elka, a portion of the atzmus mamish. And then he went on to develop a whole build-up of a case. First of all, from the concept of the Zohar Kodesh, that man nofach mitoichei nofach, and we find by the creation of Adam Arishan and the breathing of the soul into Adam Arishan, that was connected with the idea of blowing forcefully outwards, what that's called an aficha, to blow out forcefully in Lashon Kodesh. And then we moved on to what appeared to be a slight derivation or modification of that case by saying that all neshamas derive from the level by Hashem of his thoughts or his machshava. Now, if you don't mind, don't make smart smiles during the class. It appears that they come from the level of machshava. Neshamas Yisrael olu b'machshava. And then he connected that also with the union of Chokhmah, and he said that just like the ben by a boss of Adam down in this world, a son is born directly from the moyach of the father, or the moyach of Av, in the same way, as it were, all the neshamas are born from the Eibishter's Chokhmah and his Machshava. And we spoke in some detail about those two levels, that basically, even though one can differ between Machshava and Chokhmah, we equalize them here as a very high level, the essential and first and main gilui of the Moyach, the first revelation of the power of the Moyach is in Chokhmah and in Machshava, even though Machshava is only a lavush, as he points out later on in Tanya. So that presented a question that if they're only from Chokhmah and Machshava, that appears to be already a lower level of divine revelation, not chelik elokah. It doesn't seem to be from the very essence of Hashem, as we pointed out. Therefore, he brought us the Rambam, beginning first of all with a statement from the Tikkun Zohar. He brought the Rambam that hu hayodea v'hu hayodea yadua v'hu hamado atzmo, that the Rambam says that the Eibishter and his knowledge are all one. That the Eibishter's knowledge is so united with him that they're all one. So that answered the question, how can you say that it's a chelik elokah mimal, and at the same time say it's only from the level of Deah? Because we say that the Eibishter, how he is in his etzem, and the Deah are all one. And as we pointed out, the Rambam approaches that whole and develops that whole point and doctrine in his great work, because he wants to avoid any possibility of saying that there's a multiplicity in Hashem. Because the moment you say that the Eibishter knows or understands or gains knowledge outside himself or through a medium which is outside himself and then brings it into himself, then that implies that there's a ribui in Hashem. There's like a medium which gets him the knowledge and brings him the knowledge to him. Like we see by our Odom, Lamata, that's how it works. You don't know certain inyanim at the beginning. Later, through the power of your das, which has been given into you, which is a medium in your system through the moya, then you bring into yourself things which haven't been there before. And that's the concept of das. Mashenk and Lamaila, the Rambam want to avoid that at all costs, to say that Eibishter in any way had a medium outside himself or in himself, through which he gains knowledge, and the knowledge is kilo outside him and has to be brought into him. That would imply that there's something Hashem didn't know, or it would imply that there's something apart from him which he had to bring into himself. And therefore, in order to avoid that, the Rambam says there's no such thing, that everything is all one. It's all one complete unity, Hashem and his knowledge and the known thing, and the thing that he knows is all one absolute unity. And that was what obliged the Rambam to say that. So by bringing that Rambam and by basing ourselves on that doctrine, then we earn the two inyanim. One, we say that the neshama is from Etzem Elokus, from Hashem himself, and it's also from his Deya, because he himself and his Deya, or his Chokhmah, are all one. You can't separate between them, that Hu Hamada Hu Hayoy Deya. He is the knower, and he is also the knowledge. And then we went on the Hagor to point out that the Chakmei HaKabbalah also accept that principle. And we dealt at some length with different details in the Hagor, and how it represents different opinions on the part of great authorities over the generations, including the Ramak, the Arizal, and the Maharal Prague, and how they all interrelate. We dealt with that in the previous class. So now we go back into the text inside. Yeshu hu hamada v'hu hayodeya chulu v'dov hazeh ye'ein b'cheles ha'odam l'havinoi al boiriyoi. And a thing like this is not possible for a mensch to appreciate that in clarity. He can't really appreciate in full detail clarity how that can be, that Hashem is one with a thing which is described already as a specific medium or entity, how Hashem can be united ad kedei kach with Deya, that he is called Hua Deya Atzmo, that the Deya is him, and the thing which is known is also him. A person can't really appreciate how an unlimited Eibishter, and an Eibishter is held to be complete and utter subshuto, absolute oneness, how that can be a limited entity can be one absolutely with him. And therefore says the Rambam himself writes that Loshen, but the Loshen in the Rambam is slightly different. And the Alter Rebbe quotes it as Dov Hazeh, a thing of that nature, Ein b'yecheles ha'odam, it's not within the ability of a mensch, lahavinoi al boiriyoi, to appreciate that in its real clarity. But in the Rambam it's written the Loshen, V'ein Dov Hazeh b'yecheles ha'odam lahakiroi al boiriyoi. Well, the word lahakir means to recognize or to understand. It's well known that the word lahakir is a slightly stronger word than lahavin, and the fact that the Alter Rebbe puts in the word lahovin instead of lahakir maybe tends to indicate that Eino Chanami, the Rambam says you can't even recognize that. Now, maybe mitzad the shleimus of the neshama of a yid, it is possible to have a form of recognition in that dahainu, because recognition doesn't just mean to know something in seichel, but recognition also implies the idea of feeling and sensing and seeing something in a deeper level. For example, you say, "Oh, I know him for years back." So that's been existing. The fact that you had a connection with that person is something deep inside your feeling. It's not just a reasoned matter. It's not a matter of the reasoning and the seichel. And the same when we use the expression, I recognize something, or that implies a deeper connection than what. So maybe the Alter Rebbe is hinting with that it could be you can recognize that the neshama feels that Hashem must be one, and the neshama has an awareness in itself that Hashem is complete unity, absolutely from all sides. He is absolute unity, but lahavinet, to understand it in seichel, is very, very difficult and impossible for the mensch to really appreciate how the unlimited and the limited can be all one. Betachlis hayichud, with absolute unity together. And that's what the Arizal said, that Einochanami, you can't possibly describe that or hold such a inyan unless you talk about the tzimtzum. You must talk about that the unlimited state of Hashem has reduced and retracted himself in some way to unite with what we could call an entity of a limited sort. And therefore that's the famous doctrine of the tzimtzum, and even tzimtzumim rabim, as he called them here, the Alter Rebbe, in the name of the Arizal. However, we see then that we've reached the point that Yiddish neshama is Einoch Hanami from the level of Moyach, the level of Chochmah and Machshova Lamaila, but that doesn't in any way present us with a contradiction that it is absolutely from the essence of Hashem, how he is in his own self. It's just that we can't really explain that, and it's impossible for the mensch really to appreciate that. Al boiroi kidiksiv, as is written, Hacheka Eloka Timto. Now, this is a pasuk in Eov in chapter 11. But over there, it's well known that Eov suffered. In the beginning, Eov was a very rich man and very successful in all of his undertakings, and he had a big family, and he'd married them most successfully, and he was a man of influence and money and all that one could possibly desire. And then Hashem visited him with Yisurim, with suffering and things, and that caused him a big confusion in all of his opinions about Elokus and in what we'd call his deos. And therefore the Sefer Eov is a very dramatic description of how this great man had kashyas on all that Hashem had done. He had questions, and then great people visited him and tried to reason with him and tried to explain that you nonetheless have to accept these, and that you're not right on certain points. On certain points we can understand you, but on the whole you're not right. And that was the huge dialogue that is described in the Sefer Eov. And so these great men all visited at different points Eov, or some of them visited him in groups together. And so chapter 11 is after he has stated some of his embittered questions against Hashem, and then one of the great people who's answering him begins a statement to him, which early in that statement there occurs the question, Hacheka Eloka Timto, if you inquire, Cheka is from Lashon Chakiro, to inquire, if you will inquire into the divinity you will find. Meaning, is it possible then ultimately to understand the divine in Seichel? You follow? So therefore the Alter Rebbe is quoting that passage to back up what he said, that you can't really understand Elokus in Seichel and in reasoning, and therefore the fact that we just made a statement which sounds difficult to understand, over that is borne out by the fact that this great person said to Eov, in order to put him straight and to help him work out all of his problems, he said to him, Hacheka, is it possible to inquire and to really understand matters of a metius Elokus? V. Ksiv, and it is written, Ki loi machshavoi say chem. And he said this is a further pasuk which is written in Yeshayahu Hanavi, and this is a pasuk which we read in the you'll read it on Thursday, Be'ez Hashem, to Mincha, on if Moshiach doesn't arrive to take him out before that, Cholil on a fast day, then we read a certain chapter as the Haftorah in the afternoon in the Beis HaKnesses, And this pasuk is quoted in that Haftarah, Ki loy machshavei sai, machshavei seichem. My thoughts are not anything like your thoughts. Meaning to say that the way I understand things, meaning Hashem Himself, your machshavas can't possibly match it. My way of thinking is not your way of thinking. Purish, there's no way you can really understand my way of acting, which is a similar. I think he brings it as a support to what he just said. There's a similar idea. So we have to say that those are matching and a parallel to the two levels that we spoke on, which presented us with the whole question. First of all, the Alter Rebbe started by saying that the Neshama was from the very essence of Hashem, a Chelek Elokah. And then he said it was from Machshava and Chokhmah, which is already a specific entity, and he finished up by saying that it's really by Hashem, it's all one. That's the simple statement. So therefore, first of all, he brought me a shayla that obviously you can't understand, and that's what Eve needed to be put straight, that you can't really inquire about the very essence of the divine. And therefore I use the expression Elokah, because Elokah, as we said earlier, is a term in Yiddish, in Lashon Kodesh, meaning absolute divinity. In other words, the essence of divinity. Elokah. Acheike Elokah timtzah. Uksiv, and you said that we've also gone down to the level of Chokhmah and Ratzon. Yeah, so even there, even on that lower level which we spoke about, also taking that as a value in its own right, even that can't be understood. So meaning that the fact that the Machshava of Hashem is united with His essence, well, that's no problem, because even if you just take the Machshava of Hashem without considering its unity, you can't understand that either. So if you don't understand even the Machshava, then the degree of its unity and its oneness with the very essence of Hashem, for sure you can't understand. And therefore, we could suggest he quoted the two psukim, because they both, as it were, balance out one the other. The first one on the level of the etzem, and the second one on the level we brought down in the question, saying that if you can't, there's nothing we can understand in Hashem's ways. And once again, that's a pasuk which is talking about a much more practical level. If you look up over there in Yeshaya Hanavi, then you see he's urging people to do tshuva and to correct their ways and to come back to Hashem after having wandered away from the emes derech, from the emes way of service of Hashem. And when you think about it, tshuva is a very amazing thing, because if you have a king that he runs the whole country and he's an absolute ruler, and particularly if we take the example of Hashem is not just the king, he made everything. Everything is him. And not only he made it, but it is him. Everything is, in effect, him. So if he told us to do certain things and we don't do them, then we're going against our own essence of our existence. We're opposing our own continuous maker. So therefore the whole concept of tshuva, that we can correct that and nonetheless we can be accepted by Hashem, well, that's a big, tremendous chiddush. Therefore, if you look in the great Meforshim, in that pasuk, in the Haftarah, as I said, of the Yom HaTainis, then you'll see that they point out that you can't. Hashem doesn't think the way normally you would think, that if somebody went against Hashem, then he blew it. He's finished. He worked against his own Matthias. Therefore, he doesn't have any point, chas v'sholom, to keep going or to keep remaining there, even. And therefore, tshuva, the whole concept that you can correct and you can come back, and that Hashem wants you to do that, and He wants you to come back to Him, despite the fact that you've done a thing which is a denial of your etzem existence, like having Him. Well, that's a new thing. So that's what he said. My whole way of working is not comparable, close to your way of understanding. In a good way, what he's urging, that leave everything go and do tshuva and come back to the Eibishter, and that will put everything right, which is an amazing chiddush, indicating that itself indicates that the divine doesn't. The etzem concept of tshuva indicates that the Eibishter's way of thinking is klal, not compared to human thought. So, Ad Kan, up to here is the is the end of the quote and the end of that particular nuance of the argument, pointing out that the neshama is a chelik elokah, being as it is derived from moyach ha'av, and moyach ha'av, chokma, makshova are all one with the very essence of the Eibishter. So that leads us to a very fascinating nakuda. If we think about it deeply for a minute, that leads us to the conclusion that just like you can't understand the Eibishter, in the same way you can't understand a Yiddish neshama. It's not really, you can't really say that we have, we don't even understand our neshama the way it's in our body and the way it functions in a daily, limited way in our lives. Do you really understand your neshama? You don't really have any knowledge. You know you have a neshama, and you can see certain indications of it, but you don't really understand or have a knowledge, particularly an essential knowledge of what's called mahuz. The essence of your neshama, for sure you don't understand. But apart from that, apart from the lack of ability to really understand how your neshama works, we could suggest that since the nefesh elokis here is being described as a chelik elokah, and even on a lower level, I want to say a lower level of derivation, when it goes through machshava and chokmah, we also don't understand it because it's united with the very essence of Hashem. That means you can't have any, just like in the same way you have no ability to appreciate the greatness of Hashem and the ultimate oneness and everything connected with the essence of the Eibishter. In the same way, you have no ability to size up a Jewish neshama, and that there's something in a Yid when a Yid is walking around. He's carrying inside him a neshama, which is it's united in its inability to appreciate. It's just like the Eibishter. It's impossible to have any knowledge of a neshama. Therefore, it's the klal gadol of Avos Yisrael. What he's going to point out later in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, that you have to realize who you're dealing with. When you're dealing with Yidden B'klal, that you're dealing with a chelik elokah mimal, a divine portion. You have to have a basic understanding based on just like you give away yourself to Hashem and you love Him and you fear Him and you do everything to carry out Hashem's will. In the same way, you have to love and respect every Yid beyond your reasoning, beyond your seichel, in an unlimited way. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe said in the name of the Baal Shem Tov that Avos Yisrael is something which demands of us activities and devotion beyond reasoning and beyond time and place. As it's written in Hayom Yom, the ultimate connection of one neshama to another by Yidden is also how do you call it? It's basically an incalculable business, and therefore we see by people like the Frierdiker Rebbe and all the Rebbeim that their love of other Yidden and their devotion to other Yidden was just it had no limit, and they were just prepared to go to any extent to express that love and that sensitivity, just like, as it were. And the Alter Rebbe even said, he said on the contrary, in a way, loving another Yid is more important in a way than it is even loving the Eibishter. Because when you love another Yid, you love anyway what the Eibishter loves. You're, as it were, showing how you love Hashem by loving what He loves. In a way, indicating that you're more devoted to neshamas than what you are to Him, in a way, kavioch, as it were. And it comes to the that we've built here in these few lines, plus the Hagur, we've built a very amazing picture of what a Yid is really all about, and what the neshama of a Yid, being as it is, a chelik elokah, and even in its united sense with the lower levels through which it functions. And we're going to see this principle developed a little more as we go on. It undergoes gradations on its way down. It's united ultimately with Elokah, what Elokah means, the very essence, of the divinity. Good. Now the Alter Rebbe asks a new question. Now we come to a new move on the. You guys were playing rather mischievously a game yesterday, which is called chess. So now we come to a move on the chessboard. V'af sheyesh rovoves minei chilukei madreges b'neshomet. What we've said is you can't talk about, it's impossible to describe the greatness of a Yiddish neshama, which, if you say that they're all from Etzem Elokus, then, they're all one, they're all one and the same, the Yiddish neshama. It also said, kommt heißt, that all Yidden should be on the same basic madrega. If they have themselves a divine portion, then everybody should be similar. Yeah, it's like the concept of even higher, like he points out later in Perik Lamed Beis. It's like higher than the concept of brothers. It's like brothers are from the same etzem, the same father, and therefore they have certain similarity. Twin brothers in particular. So if all Yidden are a portion of the divine, then they should all be the same, basically, spiritually, all the way through spiritually, even into their activities in the physical world. They should all be, appropriate, exactly, one to the other. So now, says the Alter Rebbe, it's not like that. V'af, and even though we find there are tens of thousands of different levels in the Neshama, tens of thousands of madregas and levels and what you might call types on spiritual level of Neshama. Gavoya al Gavoya, one higher than the other, la'ain kate, and it has no limit. In other words, the difference is not just a relative difference, it's sometimes an absolute difference to the point that you can't talk about any basis of comparison. La'ain kate. And that la'ain kate also implies in number as well. The number of the madregas and the ways that you could describe the differences between Yidden has no limit. Kamui, for example, Goydel, Milas, Neshames, Ho'aves, or Moshe Rabbeinu. For example, if we take the tremendous Goydel, the greatness of the level, and the Mila means the advantage, and like the inequality of the Neshames of the forefathers. Now the Neshames of the forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. When we say Ovis, then we mean Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Like the Gemara says, in Masechta Brachos, that Ein Koyin LaOvis Ela LaShleisha. Forefathers are only three people, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And if they're, and the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya and later in the Geras HaKodesh, that Yaakov, for example, he's called also like the Klal, he was koidel in himself, all the neshamas of the Yidden. So a neshama that could hold in itself all the generations which are going to come out of all these chilek mimals that are going to be revealed out through him and from him, he must have been an unbelievable neshama that was so high that it contained in itself all these other neshamas, Milas, Nishmas, Ha'ovid. And it's the same with Avraham and the same with Yitzchak. Since they're called fathers, then they had in themselves all, as it were, they had a certain generality and state of supremacy in themselves, which all the other neshamas went out of them, and that's why we call them our fathers. Therefore, whenever we say Avram, we say Avram or Avinu, Avram our father. So we must say that they were very, very tremendously high neshamas. Goydel Milas Nishmas Ovis Moshe Rabbeinu Olava Oshonim. And he said, immediately following the Ovis, not immediately, but sometime after the Ovis, then take somebody like Moshe Rabbeinu. What Moshe Rabbeinu was the Noisan HaTorah, he was the Makabel HaTorah Mi Hashem, and the Noisan HaTorah called Israel. And he was unbelievably great, and all of the teaching and all the points in Torah that we make to this day were all given to a certain extent to Moshe Rabbeinu. Kiyadua, the famous statement of our sages, that nothing ever new is said in Torah that wasn't in some way given to Moshe Rabbeinu b'Sinai. So Moshe Rabbeinu was an unbelievable neshama, and like we call him a neshama Datzilas, and a neshama Dechokma Datzilas, and other tremendous names which we give. So his neshama was also incomparably greater than the neshamas, and that's what he goes on to say, compared to the neshamas, for example, in these generations where we are now. O Moshe Rabbeinu olav hasholem al nishmois doireseinu eila, compared to the neshamas of our generations now. The ikve, our neshamas now are in generations which are called ikve mashicha. Our generations, Lashon Rabim, that means the latter generations, or they're called the heel of Mashiach, Ikvei Mashiach. In other words, that Mashiach is close, and we've reached the heel. We've gone all the way down the whole height of Mashiach, and we've come to his heel, indicating that he's about to step in and he's about to come. So, what does the Elder Rebbe want with that? It's brought down that Adam Arishan, for example, he was koilel in all of his body, all the different levels of all the neshamas that would be born in all the generations. That's of interest that the Elder Rebbe doesn't mention Adam Arishan. He starts off with the Elvers, he doesn't mention Adam Arishan. We'll maybe deal with that in a further class, but just for the moment we have enough on our heads as it is, and that is that Adam Arishan, all the neshamas were kolul in different parts of Adam Arishan. So what does it mean, the Inyafan Ekvei Mashika, is according to one view that means that all the neshamas in the present generations are all neshamas that were in the heel of Adam Arishan, and they're going to be revealed the last before Mashiach will come, which indicates that the word Ikvei Mashiach means souls that were in the Eikev of Adam Arishan prior to Mashiach, not the heel of Mashiach himself, but prior to the coming of Mashiach. The simple expression Ikvei Mashiach implies, like we just said, Mashiach is about to walk in. We're holding by his heel. We've gone all the way down, and we're holding by his heel. But more exactly, that's what it implies. So it can come to us that the neshamas of Moshe and Ovis, they were unbelievably great and elevated, and klalistic general neshamas, compared to our little winning neshamas down in this generation. They're all from Adam Arishan's heel, as it were, from the very lowest level in spiritual status, l'cho'era, from the spirituality of the neshama compared to those great neshamas. Shahim b'chinas ikvayim mamish. They are, for example, to be compared like the heel, absolutely, compared to the moyach v'ha-rish. In other words, we take the fathers and Moshe Rabbeinu and the neshamas in our generation, then it's like a comparison between the type of life force present in the heel compared with the life force in the kop. And it's well known that that's a tremendous difference, because in the heel you can even scratch it and even cut it slightly, and the skin and that in the heel is so hard you don't really feel much, implying a concept of insensitivity and lack of spiritual edelkeit, lack of spiritual elevation. And therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, the neshamas in Deir Seina Eile, they're not compared to Ikvei Mashiach Stam. No, he said they are mamish. They are like the Ikvayim, compared to the moyach and the head. He said, V'chein, and similarly, B'chol Deir in every generation, Yeah, that's talking in a general historic span from the time of the Overs and Moshe Rabbeinu compared to our generation. But he said in every generation, individually, if you take every generation itself, then he said, B'chol doer v'doer, yesh roshei elfei Yisrael, there are people that they are the leaders of the thousands of the Jews. In other words, they're the Jewish leaders and the great spiritual leaders in every generation. Shenish moisehem heim b'chinas roish u'moyach. Their neshamas are also like the roish and the moyach, lagabi nishmos hamoin, compared to the neshamas of the ordinary folk. Hamoin meaning ordinary folk. Vi amei ha'oretz, and the even ignorant ones. Meaning that in every generation you've also got the relationship of roish and moyach compared to heels and Nikvayim, just like we saw in a general historical span. Amamila is going to ask herself the question in the intelligent, the minds of the intelligent reader, that how can all this be if every neshama is a chelik elakah, and even the revealed aspect of it is united absolutely with the Eibishter, b'tachlis hayichud, then how can you have all these different levels? How can there be so many different? If everything is united with Hashem and they're all part of Hashem, then like we started off, Hashem is one, and Hashem is absolute unity from all sides. How can there be this unbelievable multiplicity of these neshamas which are said to be part of that unity? So, following the old Chassidish doctrine, that sometimes you have to leave people with a question, and you have to leave them, because you look to me as if you need a bit more than a question. You need something to wake you up, or maybe you need a stimulus of some Indian. As a matter, we'll pause and we'll leave you guys with a question, and we hope that you'll be able to sleep, even despite the fact that you're being presented with such a disturbing question. But don't sleep until after the Seder. Good. So we'll see Be'ez Hashem in the coming lessons to deal more with this question, and then we'll move on to the answer, which is quite an answer, quite a demanding piece of work. Good.